We are going to be talking about the just concluded China-Africa summit that has left many wondering what the future holds for Nigeria-China relations. As President Bola Tinubu led a delegation to Beijing, China, what were the key takeaways from, of course, this participation? These are what we will be diving into. So the 2024 summit of the Forum on China-African Cooperation, which is the FOCAC, the aim was, of course, to build the greatest economic collaboration in the world. The focus is on strengthening ties and advancing mutual interest between China and African nations. And it was themed joining hands to advance modernization and build a high-level China-Africa community with a shared future. About 53 countries, in Africa, which amounts to 54, but then 53 countries were in attendance, and the key outcomes of it, of course, has to do with modernization, partnership, economic trade cooperation, debt relief, financial support, health and education initiatives, cultural and people-to-people exchanges. A lot of this, of course, is what we will be dissecting into. So this morning, we'll be dissecting the implications of the summit on Nigeria's economy, trade and international relations, from infrastructure development to technology transfer. We will examine the gains and challenges about this. And we have in the studio someone that would definitely do justice to this topic, Ambassador Haruna Warkani. He is a retired diplomat and former deputy country chair of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. Good morning, Ambassador.
Morning, viewers.
Always a pleasure having you.
It's a pleasure being here.
All right. First of all, I was so eager to get your take on this. Immediately I saw the summit, I'm like, we have to get Ambassador to dissect this with us. First take is, do you think this is a pushback on the U.S., world order that is known globally?
Well, I think first and foremost, we as Africans, not just Nigerians now, we as Africans should be happy that the China-Africa summit takes place. It's a paradigm shift in international relations, particularly the fact that China should be seen for what it is, as a society first, and now as a modern country. China represents one of the greatest friendship that could be bilateral or multilateral, as expressed in the FOCAC meetings. China represents a totally different outlook on human and people's relations. The West generally came to colonize Africa, even when China was there in existence, with a civilization that was known, with a civilization that was much better than the European and Americans. China, even during the imperial era, never ever attempted to invade, colonize, or subjugate any country. And that is where they are coming from. That's why the theme will be pulling together shared relationships, not imposition, not tutoring, not marginalizing, not sanctioning, and not all those things that we know the West to represent. And therefore, that is why it is important for Africa to understand and appreciate. There may be comments once upon a time about China, Africa, China, and the other parts of the world, but those may not be founded properly. Because for anyone who might know China very well, you will appreciate that this is the only true friendship that exists between peoples. And any nation that could afford to, in modern times, from 1974, when China came out of its revolutions and what have you, and started modern China today, to 1994, when they opened up their doors to say, the world, we are now ready, come. You would see that China has maintained a trajectory that is predictable, a trajectory that is known by all, a trajectory that is common to all, non-partisan, particularly non-partisanship. And so I am taking these backgrounds because we need to appreciate this from these initiatives, not what we are just seeing today. It's a long-standing relationship. And finally, China has a national policy that says Africa is like its greatest friend. In the United Nations, once upon a while, China was not part of the Security Council. The Western world teamed up, America and Europe particularly, refused to accept China as a member of the Security Council. And it only took a time when Africa decided to provide a bloc vote. And that bloc vote made China a member of the Security Council. For that reason alone, China had taken as a policy to say it will do everything and anything to develop Africa along. And China up to today regards itself as one of the best or the biggest developing country. China has never accepted that it is already developed. Because it says, the policy document says, until the last person is not poor in China, China is not yet developed. So if you have villages without schools, without water, without healthcare, without whatsoever, China is not yet developed country by itself. And therefore, you could see the shared values they talk about. Some of these wordings might look, careless or whatever, ambiguous, but they portend a lot of deeper themes and feelings about China and Africa. Therefore, China and Africa, it's a very, very special relationship which we should appreciate in Africa. And China has never come here to ask for anything. Rather, they have given us everything they can get.
Okay. All right. I'm glad. Now let's double back or continue on what she just said. Now, I'm glad you've established the advantage of the China-Africa relationship. Now let's bring it down home to Nigeria in particular. We see that we also have relationships with other countries like the Western world, and you laid emphasis on how it took them a while to add China to their security summit and all of that. So at this point, what does this mean? How can Nigeria balance their relationship with other countries owing to the kind of sentiments they have towards China?
Well, sincerely, we need to reassess ourselves as a people, generally in Africa and then Nigeria in particular. The West, comparatively speaking, has never been our friend. And therefore, there's nothing even to compare. They came here as exploiters. They came to loot. They came to colonize. They came to dictate to us even what we should do, which is a stark reality and difference from what China is doing. So here in Nigeria, for instance, if China tells you we want to do this, most likely you are going to see that being done. And another very important difference between what is going on here and everywhere else is, whereas some of the agreements signed by Mr. President vis-a-vis other similar agreements signed by other countries in the past, you will see that we have what we call hard projects vis-a-vis soft projects. America and Europe, for instance, when they come here, most of the agreements we have signed with them have to do with soft projects, which translates to programs. That's why if you go around the country today, you are not likely to see any physical project that you can touch, you can see, done by either America, France, Germany, or wherever, or Canada, or whatsoever. However, you will hear plenty of programs, HIV, fertility support, just name it. you see programs all over the place, but you can hardly put a hand on any one that is a project, a road from point A to town B.
All right, Ambassador, we still have a lot to talk about, but before we continue with the program, of course, let's take a look at just a clip of how this entire, summit happened.
The strategic partnership should result in our regional development goals. Peace, stability, security in West Africa is very, very crucial. Nigeria remains committed to our economic development, forthright, non-aligned, and we are on the path to economic reforms that will agenda growth. We believe that you have reformed the Chinese economy, and our program too is on that course. I am a reformer.
You are welcome back from that. Anyway, that was, the president there speaking at the African-China Summit. Now, we still have Ambassador Warkani here with us in the studio, and joining us now, our second guest in the studio, who is also one of the participants at the African-China Summit. We have Ilyasu Rabiu Ishak. So Ishak is a seasoned farmer, researcher, and agribusiness expert. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Good to have you.
Good to have you.
So before you joined us, of course, we already kick-started the show. I don't know, take on the lead.
All right. We're talking. I think we'll get back to Ambassador to conclude
Indeed.
on what he was saying, and then we'll get to you as one who was there. So we're talking about the fate of our ties with other countries, and you made mention that the Western world are just there to explore, but China is here to give. So can you throw more light on that?
Well, I think we should be quite expectant of so many other things to happen between us and China.
Okay.
China is expanding beyond government-to-government relationship. And part of what this FOCAC has achieved would be the expansion of this, including people to people, business to business, beside the infrastructure. And then this will entail that there are businesses that are connected between Nigeria and China. China happens to be like the world's manufacturing house. Mm-hmm. Literally everything you can imagine today is produced in China, including products that are designed in the West. But because of excessive tariff at home, taxes and other levies, it has made it impossible to produce these same products in the West. And therefore, the Western countries have taken their factories to China. This has given the Chinese the appellate of the industrial country, let's say, of the whole world. You cannot imagine you holding an Apple phone that is dearly held by Americans as a prestige product, designed in California but manufactured in China.
Indeed. I mean, talking on all of that, we've seen it. We've had a discussion with even people living in China, and they say there are a lot of designers, products which the West are known for, but it is produced in China, so it's quite surprising. But then with all of this, let's bring Ilyasu to this. You witnessed this summit. I don't know if you know more clarity on the deals that our president signed, and if you can give, clarity to Nigerians to understand. We are aware that there's about 5 agreements signed by President Bola Tinubu. So give us a take of what Nigerians should expect from this agreement.
So thank you for having me. Good morning, viewers. As you rightly said, I was a participant as one of the delegates at the recently concluded FOCAC in Beijing. And for me, I think Nigerians should be very much expectant of, very yielding outcomes from this engagement. It gives me great delight, to have witnessed this, summit. And just like the ambassador Ahmed mentioned, we need to put into context the China-Africa relationship to understand that China is a very important regional partner to Africa, especially when it comes to, trade. Because if we look at the numbers, China is responsible for more than 20% of the total import to Africa. The same way it's responsible for about 16 to 18% of the total export from Africa, totaling about over 260 billion US dollars, in trade volumes just in 2023. So you can see, for China to have, for China to be responsible for this significant percentage when it comes to trading and dealing with Africa, it signifies China's great role as a regional partner to Africa. And this FOCAC was focused on enhancing these ties between China and Africa, particularly Nigeria being the biggest market in Africa and being the biggest partner to China in Africa. So there were quite a positive engagement with the Chinese, both Chinese government and Chinese entrepreneurs. I had the privilege to be to have participated at a high-level business meeting between Chinese and African entrepreneurs, of which the Honorable Minister of Trade and Investment led that discussion with the Chinese entrepreneurs. And I will say, response from the Chinese side is very positive, very encouraging, and very deliberate. The Chinese people are very deliberate in dealing with Africa, in dealing with Nigeria in particular, understanding the size of our market, and this is something they have demonstrated. And as you rightly said, the president executed a number of agreements, not just the president, even some other state governors, like Lagos State Governor, who have signed an MOU with a company, YKA, in China, as a strategic partner to enhance the Lagos rice mill in Imota, the Imota rice mill. Okay. Also, in the same vein, another MOU was executed still between the Lagos State government and Chinese company, the CCECC, with respect to building the Lekki-Ipe expressway. A number of other governors as well. The Kaduna State governor, who have signed an MOU with Huawei for development of smart houses in Kaduna State. Some private companies like IRS in Kano, IRS Group, who have signed, who secured a partnership agreement with also one of the leading Chinese companies for setting up 500 megawatt solar manufacturing plant in Kano. Which all speak to the country's ambition in energy transition, which will significantly boost industrial activity, manufacturing activity, and also enhance the livelihood, because with sufficient and sustainable energy, then the livelihood of Nigerians stand to be enhanced. And also myself, who I was able to shook some hands with some Chinese partners with respect to increasing what Nigeria currently does when it comes to exporting agro-commodities to China. And another thing I'm quite excited about is our the success we recorded in making Chinese government to agree to include soybean export to China, to include soybeans in the protocol list of commodities Nigeria is allowed to export to China. This is quite a momentous moment for us, because it will enable Nigeria to explore the second largest market for soybeans in the world.
All right. Sorry to cut you short. Let me get back to Ambassador now. Let's look at the implementation. We know that Nigerian governments have one thing, implementation of these things. What do you foresee when it comes to implementation of these policies and sustainability, holding on to it and making it go on to better the lives of Nigerians?
Well, I think this also brings us to the difference between China and other parts of the world when it comes to some of these things. Implementation will have only challenges if we, on our own side as Nigerians now, either government or enterprises, fail to fulfill their own. But for China, you can almost swear they will surely do what they say they are doing. They have proven around the world, not just here in Nigeria, that when they are committed to a project, they normally do. And in that respect, we will expect that Nigerian businesses need to wake up and do what is right at the right time. Fulfill our own parts of any agreement we may sign with China or the Chinese. Like I said earlier, they are emphasizing more on people to people, business to business connections, and they see this as assisting them, also boosting their manufacturing capacity. That's why the Chinese are literally everywhere around the world looking for the basic raw materials, minerals and agricultural products to feed their industries, because the industries today are very hungry, looking for resources almost everywhere around the world. And manufacturing goes on 24/7. China hardly sleeps.
All right, Ambassador, are you not skeptical about the implementation when it comes to our government? We saw during President Muhammadu Buhari's led administration, there's been multiple agreements, even the Mambila project, but still it has not been executed. Are you not skeptical about that?
Well, yes, skeptical one has to be, because it has been part of our tradition. And, even the recent very deep embarrassment of confiscating our jets across the world and other assets as a result of failure of implementation of an agreement entered with the Chinese government, enterprise. These are the kind of things that we need to guard against. And I think the government agencies need to really up their games too, as per monitoring, evaluation and supervision of some of these things, because the newly set up Financial Reporting Council, etc., they need to do much more, because when agreements are signed bilaterally or multilaterally, we need to respect those things, because we have been failing sincerely.
Indeed.
The railway expansion programs in this country by now, which many more cities should have been connected.
Indeed. Ambassador, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Due to time constraint, we cannot continue, but definitely we have a lot, and we hope to get to bring both of you gentlemen back to the studio to talk about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you
so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, that was, of course, our analyst. We have, of course, Ilyas Rabiu Isaac, who is a seasoned farmer researcher and agri-business expert. He was live there at the China-African Summit, and also Ambassador Haruna Ali Warkani, who is a diplomat, also legend in chair of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, joined us to dissect the summit that happened, that hopefully would favor African as a continent. With that, we'll take a break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into the front pages of the national dailies. Stay with us.